Welcome to the strangest countdown in medical history, where Victorian cures promised everything and delivered mild poisoning with a smile. From cocaine wine to arsenic beauty pills, we're ranking the weirdest remedies ever sold to a trusting public. It's 18 gloriously unhinged concoctions, each worse than the last. Grab a seat, clutch your liver, and prepare to question every bottle your ancestors ever trusted. If you enjoy falling asleep to stories where medicine and madness shared a bottle, hit that like button and subscribe for more delightfully drowsy disasters. This episode is part of our Victorian series, a cosy collection of bedtime stories exploring the most bizarre, baffling and beautifully packaged poisons of the 19th century. Tell us in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is, because there's something oddly soothing about drifting off to tales of chloroform, cordial and very confident quackery. Now dim the lights, get cosy, and let yourself float into a world where feeling calm, quiet and slightly sedated wasn't just encouraged. It was bottled and sold. Every Victorian drug gets a rank, and this one comes in at number 18 and earns its place in the prestigious category of may cause you to astral project without warning. Because while it technically helped with pain, it also helped you lose consciousness, forget your name, and briefly speak fluent Latin. You weren't healed. You were just temporarily removed from the physical plane. You take the eclectric oil. It tastes like a campfire married a cough drop and then both got divorced inside your throat. Your eyes water. Your tongue curls. Somewhere deep in your soul, your ancestors scream. Within 30 seconds, your entire nervous system throws up its hands and walks out. And now you feel amazing. Not in the traditional I'm cured kind of way. More in the I think I just transcended time sort of way. Your limbs are warm, your ears are ringing. You're pretty sure the wallpaper just apologised to you. And maybe it should. This is what health feels like in the Victorian era. Dizzy, flammable, and possibly haunted. Welcome to the magical world of Doctor, Thomas's eclectric oil, a product so confusing it couldn't even spell electric right. Debuting around 1858, this miracle tonic was the love child of a medieval poison cabinet and a Yankee candle. It proudly promised to fix your pain, your cough, your cold, your sprained ankle, your cat's anxiety and your personal failings, all in one convenient bottle of botanical chaos. The ingredients, buckle up. Oregano oil, because why not season your insides? Camphor, which makes your skin tingle and your regrets louder. Turpentine, typically found in paint remover and Victorian medicine. Chloroform, to knock you unconscious before the regret kicks in. Opium, the Victorian version of shut up and sit down. Hemlock famously used to kill Socrates. And a splash of alcohol, because this is basically a Victorian margarita for internal bleeding. If that doesn't scream drink me, I don't know what does. Eclectric oil didn't heal you so much as convince your brain that pain was someone else's problem now. You could have a compound fracture and still feel like dancing. Badly, and possibly naked in the street, but dancing nonetheless. The marketing was bold. One ad from an 1889 Lancaster Gazette claimed it cured neuralgia, toothache, croup, burns, bruises, colic, deafness, frostbite, paralysis, sore throat, and other inconvenient tragedies. Paralysis. They just threw that one in like it was athlete's foot. Even more mysterious was the recurring image of a cat on the bottle. A judgmental, wide-eyed cat who either symbolised vitality, multiple lives, or maybe just wandered into the ad agency and refused to leave. Did the cat use the oil? Did the cat become the oil? No one knows. But Victorians saw a random cat on the label and said, "Yep, that's the stuff I want to rub into my open wound." The oil was so strong that even the British Medical Journal issued a polite cough in 1903, suggesting that perhaps chloroform and opium weren't ideal for casual use. Meanwhile, the average customer was chugging it for sore knees and then blacking out in a hedge for 3 days. One newspaper from 1891 reported a man in Cornwall who applied eclectric oil to a bee sting and then forgot how stairs worked. He described the sensation as spiritual but sideways. Back in your Victorian bed, you're no longer in pain, or conscious, or legally alive. but you are vibrating at a frequency only cats can hear. Your windows are breathing, your feet are singing. Somewhere in the distance a brass band plays only for you. You smile softly, then drool directly onto your lace pillowcase. Eclectic oil has done its job. Sure, your liver just filed a restraining order, but your headache's gone, your memories are fuzzy. And you're pretty sure you just forgave your father. This is health, this is healing, this is eclectic. And just when you thought Victorian medicine couldn't get more unhinged, someone slides you a pink pill. It's for pale people. You're pale, you're people, and the alliteration alone feels curative. Coming in at number 17, we've got a Victorian medicine so spectacularly mediocre, it's basically the beige wallpaper of pharmaceuticals. Dr. Williams's pink pills for pale people didn't usually kill anyone, but they also didn't fix much besides your belief that buying them was a good idea. You swallow a pink pill. It slides down like a pebble that someone half-heartedly dyed blush. You wait for the rush of restored vitality, for the glow to return to your cheeks, for the vigour to surge back into your pale Victorian veins. Instead, you just feel disappointed. Not worse, not better, just vaguely aware you've been scammed by a man with a medical degree he probably printed on his cousin's press. The box promised to cure everything from anemia and rickets to paralysis, open wounds, low energy, eczema, malaria, and depression. You stare at the list. If this pill actually worked on all of that, it should also mow the lawn and balance the checkbook. Spoiler, it doesn't. Historically, the pink pills were unleashed on the public in 1886, crafted from a glamorous cocktail of iron oxide and Epsom salts, or, to translate rust and laxatives. To their credit, the iron did help with anemia. But for paralysis, for depression, for malaria, forget it. Unless your malaria was cured by the placebo effect of believing in pink branding, you were out of luck. Still, the Victorians adored them. Ads in the London Evening Standard declared the pills restored the blood and the nerve, which is impressive wording for a product that functioned like eating an old nail dipped in bath salts. The marketing spread far and wide, especially in China, where pill-based remedies already had cultural traction. So Dr. Williams' great innovation wasn't curing disease, it was rebranding expensive placebo as global sensation. One testimonial from an 1890 issue of the Times of India described how a man regained his lost vigour thanks to the pink pills. Historians suspect his vigour actually came from quitting gin for breakfast. But sure, give the credit to the pink tablets. Back in your bedroom you pop another pill just in case. You're still pale, still tired, still stuck in an era where anaesthesia was drink this brandy and bite down on wood. But at least the pills didn't kill you, which in Victorian medicine practically makes them a luxury item. And speaking of not being killed, let's step one rank higher to number 16. A liniment made of ingredients so aggressively toxic you could rub it on your sore joints or just cut out the middleman and write your will. Welcome to the nightmare that was a BC liniment. You rub it into your aching knee. The label promised relief. What it didn't mention was that the relief would come because you've basically just marinated yourself in death juice. At first there's a cosy warmth, the kind you'd get sitting by a fire. 10 seconds later it feels less like a fire and more like you've become the fire. Your knee pain vanishes, mostly because your nervous system just packed its bags and left. You can't feel your leg anymore, or the floor, or the concept of morality. Then comes the chloroform. One moment you're upright, rubbing away, the next you're horizontal, communicating telepathically with the ceiling plaster. It tells you it's proud of you. You cry. Suddenly you're floating out of your body. You drift through the window, across the street, and watch Mrs. Whitcomb yell at her husband for breathing too loud. You want to intervene, but unfortunately, you're a disembodied Victorian spirit fueled by aconite fumes. Congratulations, your knee no longer hurts. Of course, neither does the rest of your body, because you've essentially left it behind. Historically, ABC liniment appeared in 1880 and clung to the shelves until the 1930s, despite killing more customers than it healed. Victorian ads promised it would soothe sprains, bruises and neuralgia, and technically it did, in the same way a guillotine technically soothes headaches. The star ingredients were infamous. Aconite, also known as wolf's bane, which has bane right in the name. Belladonna, a plant whose nickname is literally deadly nightshade. Chloroform, beloved by surgeons and murderers alike. If you weren't already in pain when you opened the bottle, you'd definitely be in pain by the time you finished rubbing it on. Newspapers noticed. In an 1892 Bristol Mercury report, doctors politely warned of liniments of alarming effect, which is Victorian code for please stop killing yourselves with this nightmare lotion. But people kept buying it, because nothing sells like the promise of instant pain relief, even if the cost was instant everything else relief too. There are coroner's reports of folks collapsing mid-pint after slathering ABC on their backs, proving once and for all that Victorian self-care was indistinguishable from attempted homicide. Back in your bedroom, your skin is tingling, your shoulder is numb, and you're pretty sure you just had a spiritual conversation with your dead goldfish. That's ABC liniment for you. Part painkiller, part poison, part astral travel package. At number 15 we have bile beans, the Victorian miracle cure for biliousness, which is a polite 19th century way of saying, your body's making noises that scare the dog. They promise slimmer waists, radiant skin and purified blood. What they actually delivered was a bathroom experience so violent you could measure it on the Richter scale. You take a bile bean. It tastes faintly of licorice dust and poor decision-making. Within minutes, your stomach starts making noises that could be used to summon a kraken. Suddenly you're running, not for glory, not for God, but for the chamber pot. And you stay there contemplating your sins while your biliousness evacuates with the force of a Victorian cannon. The ads promised rosy cheeks, youthful cheer, and weight loss. Technically that last one is true. You are lighter. You're also pale, sweating, and gripping porcelain like it's your new religion. Congratulations, you're officially purified. Historically, bile beans hit the market in the 1880s, initially parading under the name Charles Ford's bile beans for biliousness. The name alone sounds less like medicine and more like a curse hurled by a witch. They claim to contain mysterious ingredients discovered by Australian Aboriginal healers. Spoiler, they did not. The actual ingredients were rhubarb, menthol, cascara and licorice, otherwise known as nature's polite way of telling you to cancel all your plans. An 1890s ad in the Yorkshire Evening Post promised that bile beans banished fatigue and restored youthful beauty, which is an interesting way to describe being chained to the bathroom for 48 hours, pale as death and begging the Lord for mercy. In 1905, the company was dragged into court for false advertising. Found guilty. Yes. Shut down. Of course not. They just kept selling bile beans well into the 20th century, mostly as a weight loss aid. Because apparently society has always been willing to trade internal stability for slightly looser trousers. Back in your bedroom, you're curled up like a haunted Victorian teapot, lighter than ever and spiritually hollow. The beans didn't kill you, but they absolutely destroyed everything else. At number 15, bile beans earn their place as the reigning monarch of effective in the worst way possible. At number 14, we uncork Vin Mariani, the original energising beverage of the Victorian elite. Imagine red wine, but with the added kick of cocaine. Yes, the Victorians were sipping what was essentially Merlot laced with a snowstorm, and doctors were prescribing it like it was communion. You raise the glass of Vin Mariani to your lips. At first, it's just wine. Smooth, civilised, the sort of thing you'd sip while politely judging your neighbours. Then, halfway down your throat, the cocaine hits. Suddenly, you're no longer a tired Victorian husk. You are a god. Your pulse is galloping like it's late for the derby. The wallpaper patterns are clapping for you. You feel so unstoppable you could march into Parliament, slap the Prime Minister, and demand control of the British Empire, and people would applaud. You pace the room, delivering imaginary lectures to your furniture. Ladies and gentlemen, you announce to the dresser, science has advanced. The dresser nods in approval. The curtains cheer. Your cat looks alarmed. By the third sip, you're convinced you've invented electricity, democracy, and possibly jazz. And the best part, you're just getting started. Historically, Vin Mariani was invented in 1863 by French chemist Angelo Mariani, a man who looked at wine and thought, pretty good, but what if it made you see God? Thanks to the alcohol, the coca leaf's cocaine was absorbed straight into the bloodstream. Each glass was basically a Victorian Red Bull, if Red Bull made you feel like you could wrestle a train and win. And it wasn't just the public who adored it. The Pope himself was a fan. Pope Leo XIII carried a hip flask of Vin Mariani and gave Mariani a gold medal, presumably for services to both the church and recreational chaos. Nothing says holy man like handing out blessings while running on cocaine and claret. Celebrities loved it too. Endorsements rolled in from Sarah Bernhardt, Queen Victoria, Thomas Edison. Basically, if you were famous in the 19th century, you were either drinking Vin Mariani or being very boring. Even the British Medical Journal ran ads declaring it restores health, energy and prolongs life, which is exactly what cocaine wine does, right up until the moment your heart files for divorce. Mariani knew how to market. He didn't just make wine, he made lifestyle branding. He published glossy pamphlets full of celebrity testimonials, basically the Victorian equivalent of Instagram influencers, except instead of posing with detox tea, they were high as kites on fortified Cabernet. Back in your Victorian bedroom, you're pacing, wide-eyed, convinced you've invented both flight and the concept of Monday. Vin Mariani ranks at 14 because while it technically worked, it worked too well. It gave you energy, vitality, and also the sudden ability to write a symphony, build a cathedral, and die of cardiac arrest before lunch. And if cocaine wine was a little too glamorous, number 13 brings us crashing back into the swamp. Literally. A tonic that promised to cure kidneys, hearts, and whatever else you had lying around, Dr. Kilmer's swamp root. It earns this spot because while it didn't usually kill anyone, it did convince thousands of people that drinking swamp water from a bottle labelled medicine was a good idea. You take a swig of swamp root. It tastes like someone strained a puddle through a boot and added sugar to hide the crime. Your kidneys don't feel better, but your tongue is now contemplating secession. Moments later, you're hit with the overwhelming sensation that nothing has changed, except maybe your wallet is lighter. You sit there, staring at the brown bottle, realising you just paid actual money to drink glorified ditch water with a label. You're not healed, you're hydrated, barely. Still, the advertisement said it would soothe inflamed kidneys, invigorate the system, and restore manly vigour. Which sounds promising until you remember the man selling it was named Dr. Kilmer, and the only swamp he'd ever visited was probably his own backyard. Historically, swamp root debuted in 1892, promoted by Dr. S. Andrew Kilmer and his brother Jonas. The tonic was marketed as a cure for kidney, liver and bladder problems. But mostly it was a triumph of advertising. Dr. Kilmer's factory in Binghamton, New York churned out gallons of the stuff, while Jonas masterminded one of the slickest marketing campaigns of the Victorian era. They mailed out swamp root almanacs filled with testimonials, medical diagrams and friendly reminders that if you weren't guzzling swamp juice daily, your kidneys were basically on death row. Newspapers across Britain and America ran their ads, some featuring glowing letters from grateful patients. One 1897 issue of the Evening News even claimed swamp root had restored vigour to a retired colonel, which could mean his kidneys or could mean something else entirely. The actual ingredients? A mix of mild diuretics, alcohol and flavouring, enough to make you pee a little more sure, but not enough to cure a failing kidney. Still, the Kilmer brothers became millionaires convincing Victorians that a sip of flavoured swamp water was the fountain of youth. Back in your Victorian bedroom, you burp politely, stare at the bottle, and realise your kidneys feel exactly the same as they did 10 minutes ago. Swamp root didn't fix you, but it didn't kill you either, which in this ranking counts as a minor miracle. At number 13, swamp root holds its place as the Victorian equivalent of detox tea, overpriced, overhyped, and underwhelming. At number 12, we meet Chlorodyne, a medicine so powerful it was marketed as the answer to every human problem: cholera, coughs, cramps, insomnia, diarrhea, hysteria, and probably an existential crisis or two. It earns this spot because while it did technically work, It worked in the sense that it knocked you out cold with a cocktail of narcotics strong enough to put an elephant into therapy. You take a spoonful of Chlorodyne, it tastes vaguely of peppermint, and your immediate future sliding sideways. Within minutes you're melting into your chair like a forgotten candle. The cough is gone, yes, but so is your ability to blink at normal speed. Your stomach settles, your bowels quiet, and your brain quietly detaches from the space-time continuum. You think to yourself, I'm cured, but the thought is moving so slowly it might not arrive until next Tuesday. The dog is looking at you with concern. You try to reassure him, but all that comes out is a slow, sticky syllable that sounds like blah. Congratulations. You no longer feel your pain, or your legs, or your taxes, or the crushing weight of existence. Historically, Chlorodyne was the crown jewel of Victorian patent medicine, invented by Dr. John Collis Brown in the mid-1800s. It was hailed as a miracle drug. The formula? Opium, chloroform, cannabis, peppermint, and alcohol. Basically a Victorian Long Island iced tea, but with more consequences. It was advertised as a universal remedy. Cholera, neuralgia, diarrhea, migraines, insomnia, you name it. If you were sick, Chlorodyne promised to fix it. In fact, one 1864 advertisement in the Lancet declared it the most valuable medicine ever discovered, which is impressive considering it was essentially liquid anesthesia with a garnish, and people loved it. Soldiers in India swore by it, mothers gave it to their families, the British working class bought it by the bottle. Of course, addiction rates skyrocketed, but in the Victorian mindset, that was just being committed to your health plan. Regulators eventually noticed. By the late 19th century, lawsuits began piling up about overdoses, counterfeit versions, and suspicious deaths. In one case, reported in the Yorkshire Gazette, a man dosed himself for nervousness and promptly stopped being nervous, mostly because he was horizontal for the next 48 hours. Yet despite its dangers, Chlorodyne remained popular well into the 20th century, gradually reformulated into weaker, less deadly versions. Because if history proves anything, it's that once people find a medicine that makes them forget life, they will never let it go quietly. Back in your Victorian bedroom, you're lying very still, staring at the ceiling, wondering if your soul is still in the room or if it left 5 minutes ago. The cough is gone, the cramps are gone, and so is any memory of why you took the stuff in the first place. At number 12, Chlorodyne secures its spot as the Victorian cure-all that technically did everything it promised, provided your definition of cure includes temporary death practice. At number 11, we have Hamlin's Wizard Oil, a medicine that promised to cure any pain, anywhere, anytime. Which is bold, considering it was invented by a former stage magician. Yes, this cure-all ranked just outside our bottom 10 because it combined two of Victorian Britain's favourite pastimes, reckless drinking and false advertising. You take a swig of Wizard Oil. The first sensation is alcohol, a sharp, throat-burning reminder that this medicine is basically moonshine in a top hat. Then comes the camphor, ammonia, chloroform, sassafras, cloves, and turpentine. Your tongue stages a walkout, your stomach files a complaint, and your brain is suddenly auditioning for a fireworks display. Moments later, you feel cured. Not in the medical sense, but in the you're too drunk and chemically embalmed to care anymore sense. You slump in your chair, a sloppy grin plastered across your face, while your liver weeps quietly in the corner. Congratulations, the pain is gone, along with most of your higher brain function. Historically, Hamlin's Wizard Oil was concocted in 1861 by John Austin Hamlin, a failed magician who decided the next logical career move was medicine, which is Victorian logic at its finest. His advertising slogan was, "There is no sore it will not heal, no pain it will not subdue." In other words, trust me, I have a cape. The oil was mostly alcohol, 50 to 70%, but it also included chloroform, ammonia, camphor, sassafras, turpentine, and other ingredients you'd normally use to strip wallpaper, not heal pneumonia. It could be rubbed on the skin or taken internally, because nothing says safe like turpentine shots. Wizard Oil was sold at travelling medicine shows, which were half sales pitch, half Broadway production. Performers in silk top hats and spats would sing songs, juggle and promise miracle cures, all while hawking bottles of this chemical nightmare. Imagine buying your cough syrup from a magician who just pulled a rabbit out of his pants. That was Victorian healthcare. By 1916, things caught up to the Hamlins. The company's owners were fined under the Pure Food and Drug Act for advertising wizard oil as a cancer cure. Which, to be fair, it probably did cure cancer, in the sense that it killed you first. Back in your Victorian bedroom, you're lying sideways, half drunk, half poisoned, fully confused. Your pain is gone, replaced by the feeling that your entire skeleton just resigned. At number 11, wizard oil earns its spot for being less of a medicine and more of a magic trick, except the rabbit vanishing was your will to live. At number 10, we have Mrs. Moffat's Shoefly powders for drunkenness, a delightful little product that cured your desire to drink by violently removing everything else from your body, including your will to live. In modern terms, it was less medicine and more gastronomic punishment for your lifestyle choices. You mix the powder into water and take a sip. At first, it tastes vaguely metallic. You assume that's normal. Then your stomach makes a noise not unlike a cannon being loaded, and you suddenly understand that this cure is going to involve an exorcism. Your body enters full rebellion mode. You're not just vomiting, you're transcending. Your soul is trying to evacuate through your esophagus. You dry heave so hard your ancestors feel it. Your houseplants wither. The neighbours hear you retching and begin writing their wills just in case it's contagious. Congratulations, you're sober. And also crying, gasping and whispering promises to the Lord you absolutely won't keep. Historically, Shoefly powders came onto the market in the late 1800s, claiming to rid you of alcohol addiction. Not through therapy, conversation or self-reflection. No. Through tartar emetic, a substance so toxic it made your organs stage a group resignation. The theory was simple. If drinking leads to projectile vomiting and mild spiritual detachment, maybe you'll think twice before sipping again. And sometimes it did work, mostly because the human brain develops trauma faster than it develops cravings. In court, physicians were asked whether it was dangerous. One doctor responded that tartar emetic was injurious to the organs, a charming understatement, considering it turned your stomach into a slip and slide of doom. And yet, the ads were glowing. Victorian pamphlets showed proud wives beaming at their husbands, who were totally cured and definitely not curled up behind the woodpile like damp laundry. Nothing says domestic bliss like watching your spouse hurl into a coal bucket at sunrise. Back in your Victorian bedroom, you lie in a puddle of sweat and shattered dignity, whispering never again to the ceiling. Your liver may still be confused, but your stomach is sending handwritten threats to your brain. At number 10, Shoefly powders sit proudly as the most violent intervention in the history of temperance, a cure that worked through fear, nausea, and sheer digestive terror. At number 9, we meet Radithor, the beverage that asked, what if your multivitamin was uranium? Marketed as certified radioactive water, Radithor was supposed to boost vitality, restore youth, and maybe grant immortality. Instead, it slowly turned you into a nightlight with osteoporosis. You open the sleek little bottle. The label is printed in gold. It looks expensive, elegant, almost regal. You tilt it back and take a sip. It tastes like minerals, which is charming until you realize those minerals are radium and thorium, and your bones are now on the clock. But you feel amazing. Like, alarmingly amazing. Your body tingles. Your heart races. You leap out of your chair and declare that you will be reshingling the roof today. By hand. Even though you've never roofed anything in your life. Your spouse watches with growing concern as you rearrange furniture and recite Latin phrases you definitely never learned. Your pupils are the size of shillings. The wallpaper begins to vibrate. You're either ascending to a higher dimension or you've just had 3 bottles of Radithor. It's hard to tell. Radithor was introduced in 1918 by William J. A. Bailey, a Harvard dropout and self-declared doctor who decided that radioactive isotopes were the future of medicine, and also a fun party trick. Each bottle contained triple distilled water infused with 1 microcurie of radium-226 and 1 microcurie of radium-228, which is science speak for enough to light up your skeleton like a Christmas tree. The product was marketed as a cure for fatigue, depression, impotence, weak blood, and of course not glowing in the dark, which was apparently a flaw in 1919. It was also promoted as a luxury item. Rich people drank Radithor to show they could afford radioactive beverages, which is a fun reminder that generational wealth has never guaranteed good judgment. The most infamous victim was Eben Byers, a wealthy industrialist and amateur golf champion who drank 3 bottles a day for years. He praised the drink, swore by its power, and was quoted saying, "Radithor worked splendidly until it didn't, because then his teeth fell out, and his jaw, and most of his skeleton." He died in 1932 from radium necrosis, and his corpse was so radioactive it had to be buried in a lead-lined coffin, a product not previously required by the average beverage. After Byers' dramatic disintegration, the government finally stepped in, Radithor was pulled from shelves, and the public learned a valuable lesson. Just because something feels amazing doesn't mean you should drink it 900 times. Back in your bedroom, you lie flat on your bed, pulsing faintly, convinced you've never felt better. Your teeth are buzzing softly. The moonlight seems to reflect off your skin. You're not sure if this is wellness or an origin story. Radithor earns its place as the most stylish way to destroy your bones from the inside out. A sparkling sip of immortality with a half-life longer than your life expectancy. At number 8, we present Lydia E. Pinkham's vegetable compound, a miracle tonic that promised to soothe the many mysterious ailments plaguing Victorian women, from menstrual cramps and mood swings to the deadly all-consuming diagnosis of being too emotional near men. It lands here because while it wasn't the worst thing you could ingest, it was a marketing masterpiece that convinced millions of women to self-medicate with herbs, hope, and roughly enough alcohol to sterilize a horse. You pour yourself a small, delicate glass of vegetable compound. The bottle says it's for female weakness, which you're pretty sure refers to either your uterus or your ability to tolerate your in-laws. Either way, bottoms up. The taste is earthy, herbal, sweet, and suspiciously smooth for a medicinal remedy. That's when it hits you. This is booze, like actual drink in the parlour with your knitting booze. You blink slowly. The room feels warmer. The pain in your abdomen loosens. You feel relaxed. You feel empowered. You feel like you could burn down the patriarchy with a teacup and a sharp hat pin. 10 minutes later, you're offering unsolicited advice to a fern and writing letters to Parliament. You feel cured. Are your hormones balanced? Who knows? But your nerves are soaked in gin, and you suddenly feel okay about everything. Lydia Pinkham, a Massachusetts housewife, invented her famous vegetable compound in 1875 using a blend of herbs including black cohosh, unicorn root, life root, pleurisy root, and fenugreek, steeped in a generous bath of alcohol, often 18 to 20% ABV, which is more than most wines. Lydia wasn't a doctor, but she was a marketing genius. She sold the tonic as a remedy for female complaints, a category that conveniently included menstrual cramps, menopause, hot flashes, wandering wombs, hysteria, wanting to lie down for a minute, breathing while female. Her face was on every bottle, every newspaper, and every almanac, giving her an air of trustworthiness. Victorian women adored her. She was the soothing, straight-talking auntie you wished you had. The one who said, "Yes, dear, men are the problem, now drink this and ignore them." And it worked, or at least it felt like it did. Whether it was the black cohosh or the 4-ounce shot of pure liquor, women reported feeling better. Some even credited it with saving their marriages, their health, and their sanity. Others just appreciated that it made their daily chores slightly less soul-destroying. Critics eventually pointed out that the primary active ingredient was alcohol, and that many women were basically sipping their way to serenity one boozy dose at a time. But Pinkham's defenders argued, if it's helping and it's not killing you, who cares? And honestly, fair. Back in your Victorian sitting room, you've written a passionate diary entry, reorganised your lace drawer, and told your husband to stop breathing through his nose. You are calm, clear-headed, and mildly tipsy. Lydia E. Pinkham's vegetable compound earns its place as the unofficial drink of the Victorian feminist resistance. Part herbal remedy, part social rebellion, and all I'm fine, leave me alone. At number 7, we arrive at Bromidia, a Victorian-era nerve tonic that didn't just lull you to sleep. It assassinated consciousness. This stuff wasn't here to help you relax. It was here to drag you off stage with a hook, whether you were ready or not. Marketed for insomnia, nervous tension, hysteria, and other inconvenient emotions, Bromidia earns its place on our list because it was shockingly good at what it did, namely making you too sedated to remember why you were upset in the first place, or what day it was, or how doors work. You take a teaspoon of Bromidia. It's thick, like cough syrup and regret. There's a hint of bitterness, a whisper of licorice, and then darkness. Not emotional darkness, actual darkness. Your eyelids slide down like velvet curtains, and your knees politely excuse themselves from your skeleton. You don't fall asleep, you evaporate. Before the spoon hits the table, you're already horizontal, mentally adrift in a world where time doesn't exist, and your aunt isn't asking about your marriage prospects. There is no noise, there is no stress, there is only Bromidia, and the sweet, sweet hum of your nervous system being gently shut down like an outdated operating system. Congratulations, you're not just sleeping, you're hibernating in Victorian style. Historically, Bromidia was a pharmaceutical lullaby in a bottle. Launched in the late 1800s, it was marketed as a cure for every overreaction the Victorians didn't want to deal with. Insomnia, nervousness, tremors, anxiety, female opinions, inconvenient personality traits, and restless men, which was code for anyone not currently nailed to a fainting couch. The ingredient list read like the shopping list of someone trying to tranquilize a dragon. Chloral hydrate, a knockout drug used in anesthesia. Potassium bromide, a sedative typically given to seizure-prone dogs. Hyoscyamine, a hallucinogen from nightshade. Alcohol, because even your poison needs a buzz. This wasn't a drink. This was chemical exile. Physicians raved about it. One 1892 advertisement promised that Bromidia produced restorative, dreamless sleep with no hangover, which is technically true, if you never wake up. Victorian women swore by it. Victorian doctors prescribed it with the enthusiasm of a toddler with a label gun. A little too emotional? Bromidia? Can't sleep? Bromidia. Thought about asking your husband to do the dishes? Bromidia. Overworked? Underworked? Thought about taking a walk without permission? Triple dose. It worked. Oh, did it work? 1 dose and you were horizontal. 2 doses and you'd miss Christmas. 3 and you might astrally project to 1923. It was the Victorian answer to everything except actual medical progress. It didn't treat root causes, it muted the user until everyone else could have a nice quiet dinner. There were side effects, of course, dependency, withdrawal symptoms, a vague sense that you'd been asleep since the Crimean War. But by Victorian standards, if it didn't kill you or summon demons, it was considered mildly effective. Back in your candlelit bedroom, you're flat on your back, slack-jawed, breathing like a hibernating bear in a corset. The world could end, and you'd be none the wiser. Someone moves your limbs to dust under you. You don't mind. You haven't minded anything since breakfast yesterday. At number 7, Bromidia earns its rank as the Victorian dream machine. Part tranquilizer, part eraser, part social strategy to keep emotional people from finishing their sentences. It didn't just put you to sleep, it knocked out your ancestors. At number 6, we arrive at the glamorous, glittering, utterly horrifying world of Mercury, the Victorian multi-purpose miracle metal. Got a rash? Use Mercury. Toothache? Mercury. Depression? Dandruff? Digestive problems? Diphtheria? Or just feeling mildly dull? Slather on some Mercury and let the madness begin. It ranks this high, not because it didn't do anything. It did plenty. Just none of it good. Mercury was the ultimate Victorian frenemy. Beautiful, seductive, and actively trying to kill you while complementing your skin. You apply a mercury-based cream to your face. It's thick, silky cool to the touch. You smooth it across your cheeks, admiring the pearly sheen it leaves behind. The mirror reflects someone who looks flawless, vaguely radiant, and maybe just a tiny bit cursed. A few hours later your lips tingle, then your teeth ache, then your gums begin to retreat like Victorian husbands avoiding emotional intimacy. But you press on, because beauty is pain, and you've been told this treatment will purify the skin and improve the temperament. You believe it, mostly because your brain is now 12% mercury vapor. Your husband compliments your glow. Your cat won't look you in the eye. You feel amazing. Also dizzy. Also maybe like time is a suggestion. But worth it, right? Historically, mercury was everywhere. The Victorians loved the stuff. It was elegant. It shimmered. It moved like liquid silver, which in their minds meant it must be healing something. Spoiler, it wasn't. Doctors prescribed mercury chloride, also known as calomel, for everything from constipation to syphilis. They used mercuric nitrate in beauty creams to fade freckles and whiten complexions. Dentists rubbed mercury into gums to fight decay. Parents fed mercury to their children for parasites. Some even mixed it with chalk and called it baby powder. Yes, baby powder. Victorians did not play. You could take it as a pill, rub it on your face, inject it, sniff it, lick it, brush your teeth with it. Basically, if there was an opening in your body, mercury was invited. It was elegant, it was scientific, it was a slow, stylish death sentence. Mercury side effects included bleeding gums, dropping teeth, tremors, insomnia, memory loss, hallucinations, madness, and eventually death by poisoned organs and regrets. But did that stop them? Oh no. It was medically endorsed. Calomel was standard issue. Queen Victoria's personal physicians prescribed it. In one documented case, an entire family was slowly poisoned by mercury-based wallpaper paste. They died beautifully. Back in your boudoir, you're lying in bed, fanning yourself daintily while small tufts of hair abandon your scalp like it's a sinking ship. Your gums are bleeding, your skin glows faintly under candlelight, and your reflection looks both ethereal and haunted by decisions. But your freckles are gone, your skin is pale and porcelain smooth, your husband calls you angelic, your doctor calls it progress, your liver calls it, you've got 6 months tops. Mercury earns its place as the prettiest poison in the apothecary. The original beauty is pain movement, except this one ends with you whispering secrets to the wallpaper while your molars fall out. At number 5, we celebrate the elegant, unhinged brilliance of Doctor. Rose's arsenic complexion, wafers, the beauty snack that whispered, what if self-care slowly murdered you? These were pills made of literal arsenic, marketed to Victorian women as the chic new way to become radiant, flawless, and emotionally unavailable. You weren't just whitening your skin, you were whitening your soul. You pop a dainty wafer into your mouth. It tastes like antique chalk and danger. Your tongue goes slightly numb, this feels fine, your cheeks warm. Your freckles tremble and begin packing tiny bags. You gaze in the mirror and gasp. You're glowing. Sure, your teeth ache and your fingernails feel loose, but wow, what a complexion. By nightfall, you're whispering romantic poetry to your reflection, while your stomach gently negotiates with gravity. But honestly, who cares? You're luminous. You're ethereal. You look like a haunted Victorian angel who just floated down from a fainting couch. And yes, you've been dry heaving into a lace-trimmed basin for 20 minutes, but the glow-up is real. Historically speaking, this was a real thing people did on purpose. Victorian society had one rule. If your skin looked too alive, you were doing something wrong. So naturally arsenic, known primarily as rat poison and inheritance shortcut, was reborn as a beauty aid. Dr. Rose's arsenic complexion wafers were sold in pretty little tins and promised to cure pimples, freckles, blushing, general face vulgarity, having the skin tone of a living mammal. It was marketed as absolutely harmless, which was a bold take for something that causes anemia, neurological damage, and haunting Victorian death rattles. But women were obsessed. 1 wafer a day and you'd be paler than a ghost's tax records. In fact, if you kept it up long enough, you could become your own ghost. Pamphlets swore it was medicinal arsenic, as if the molecules wore top hats and had degrees. One testimonial claimed, "My skin is now porcelain smooth and people ask if I'm unwell in the loveliest way. Mission accomplished. Back in your vanity mirror." You blink slowly. Your pupils are a bit too big. Your lips are the colour of old wallpaper. Your husband asks if you're cold. You say, "No, just dying beautifully." The wafers are working. You are ethereal. You are ghost chic. You are 40% more dead than you were this morning. But by God, your pores have never looked better. Dr. Rose's arsenic complexion. Wafers reign supreme as the world's most glamorous homicide, because sometimes you don't need bronzer, you just need light poisoning over time. At number 4, we proudly present Alan's Lung Balsam, the syrupy, pine-flavoured wonder sludge that claimed to heal everything from bronchitis to bleeding lungs. Why? Because it was the Victorian era, and if your chest made noise, someone somewhere was definitely bottling tree sap and lies for it. This medicinal molasses earns its high rank not because it helped, it didn't, but because of its sheer confidence in claiming it could cure tuberculosis, heal bullet wounds, and bring back the dead, all while tasting like a forest fire soaked in sugar water. You take a heroic swig of Alan's Lung Balsam. Immediately your throat is coated in something sticky and smoky. There's menthol, there's molasses, there's a hint of turpentine. Your esophagus is on a camping trip you didn't sign up for. You cough. The cough tastes minty now. That's probably progress. You take another swig. Why not? The bottle says it's safe for daily use, which in Victorian terms means no one's died today. 5 minutes later, your lungs are still wheezing, but now they're doing it politely, under a thick lacquer of tree goo and opiate serenity. You are not healed, but you are coated. Let's talk ingredients. Alan's Lung Balsam contained chloroform, just a whisper, morphine, just a splash, herbs and tar for vibes, sugar and alcohol for return customers. Together, this sticky symphony created the sensation of soothing your lungs, mostly by numbing your body until it stopped complaining. Doctors loved it. Mothers swore by it. Cowboys drank it straight from the bottle. Some even poured it over pancakes. Probably. No rules back then. In one 1884 ad, Alan's balsam was praised as the only cure for diseases of the throat and lungs known to civilized man. Which is fascinating because tuberculosis was still killing half the population. But sure, balsam it is. There's even a historical account of it being used during Civil War surgeries as a substitute when actual chloroform ran out. That's right. Soldiers were put under with cough syrup. Because apparently war wasn't traumatic enough without dessert drugs involved. Back in your bedroom. You're upright, sort of. Your lungs still feel like a haunted accordion, but now they smell like pine cones and Victorian desperation. You take another sip, because the bottle says to, and because you're starting to enjoy the way the wallpaper breathes when you stare at it too long. Your cough is still there, but it's muffled, muted, trapped under a half-inch layer of Alan's Lung Balsam, like a corpse under floorboards. At number 4, this balsam earns its place as the most syrupy form of denial the Victorian era ever produced. Proof that if you pour enough sugar and opium on a problem, you can almost forget you're coughing up blood. At number 3, strutting proudly into the final stretch, is the utterly legendary Vin Mariani, the Victorian health tonic that was basically red wine and cocaine, but make it fashion. It was praised by queens, popes, presidents, authors, artists, inventors, and presumably at least one overexcited butcher. Why? Because it made you feel unstoppable, elegant, deeply inspired, and also slightly like your skeleton was trying to high-five its way out of your body. It earns a top 3 slot not because it was subtle or safe, it was neither, but because it was so successful, so socially acceptable, and so dangerously effective that the Victorians were literally day-drinking cocaine with zero shame. This wasn't medicine. This was a party in a bottle that came with a doctor's note. You pour yourself a glass of Vin Mariani. The label says it's invigorating, stimulating, non-intoxicating, which is suspicious because it smells like a bar fight at a French vineyard. You take a sip. The taste is rich, complex, a smooth blend of Bordeaux wine and immediate euphoria. Before the glass is halfway down, your vision sharpens, your posture improves. You suddenly feel like writing a novel, painting a fresco, inventing electricity, and breaking off your engagement, all before lunch. You take another sip. You feel bold, powerful, flushed with confidence. You make direct eye contact with the wallpaper and win the stare down. Within minutes, you're pacing the room, composing poetry in Latin and pitching business ventures to the gas lamp. Your spouse enters the room. You declare your undying love, your plan for a dirigible-based postal service, and your new religion. Your pupils are full moons. Your teeth are clenching in Morse code. You feel amazing, you're also terrifying. Historically, Vin Mariani was the hottest beverage in Europe and America from the 1860s through early 1900s. Invented by Angelo Mariani, a French chemist with a very casual relationship to dosage warnings, Vin Mariani was red wine steeped with coca leaves, the same plant used to make cocaine. Each bottle delivered roughly 6 to 8 milligrams of cocaine per serving, which for comparison is about the same hit a modern recreational user might rack up on a coffee table when they're really not trying to sleep tonight. But this wasn't some shady back alley drug. No, this was endorsed by the Pope, literally. Pope Leo XIII not only used it, he gave Mariani a Vatican medal for inventing it. The Vatican, the actual one, handed out awards for fancy cocaine wine, and it didn't stop there. Queen Victoria loved it. Ulysses S. Grant used it to write his memoirs. Jules Verne, Alexander Dumas, Thomas Edison, all fans. Sherlock Holmes didn't exist yet, but let's be honest, he would have had it delivered by The Case. It was sold in pharmacies, promoted as a cure for fatigue, melancholy, sore throats, anemia, and female weakness, which was Victorian code for any woman who looked tired near a man. What were the side effects? Oh, just insomnia, jaw clenching, delusions of grandeur, caffeine-level mania, but with more teeth grinding and poetry, and in a few cases explosive heart palpitations at formal dinners. But did that stop anyone? Of course not. Cocaine wasn't illegal yet. It wasn't even frowned upon. It was a wellness trend. You could find Vin Mariani at high society salons, elite boarding schools, hospital waiting rooms, and probably in the top drawer of your great-great-grandmother's writing desk labelled "For Nerves." Back in your drawing room, you're wearing 3 cravats, building a telescope from household items, and writing a manifesto that will definitely start a minor cult. You feel brilliant. You feel divine. You feel like someone should make a statue of you immediately, or at least give you a minor dukedom. Your nose is tingling. Your heart is tap dancing. You're invigorated and also slightly vibrating. The only thing stronger than your sense of purpose is your jawline, which hasn't unclenched since page 2. At number 3, Vin Mariani claims its rightful throne as the official sponsor of caffeinated Victorian chaos. It was wine. It was cocaine. It was productivity in a bottle, followed by the sudden urge to weep and take apart the stove. It wasn't just a medicine. It was a lifestyle, one that burned gloriously, brightly, and probably ended in dramatic poetry and heart murmurs. Coming in at number 2 with the grace of a charging rhinoceros in a powdered wig is the unstoppable force of nature known as Holloway's pills. Marketed as a cure-all, these magic beans claim to fix everything from headaches to heartbreak, indigestion to insanity, gout to gunshot wounds. Did they actually help? Not really, but were they everywhere? Oh yes. Holloway's pills were the medieval Swiss Army knife of Victorian medicine, except instead of tools it just had laxatives, lots of them. You take a Holloway's pill, it's small, innocent looking. You chase it with a sip of tepid water and go about your day. 10 minutes later, your stomach makes a sound like a cannonball hitting a tub of soup. You pause, you breathe, you run, and thus begins the evacuation process known to science as every organ you've ever had is now filing for divorce. You're sweating, you're praying, you're bargaining with higher powers you previously mocked. The world narrows to you and the chamber pot. The good news, your headache is gone. The bad news, so is your will to live. Who was this Holloway guy? Thomas Holloway was not a doctor, not a chemist, not even remotely qualified. He was a Victorian marketing genius with the soul of a carnival barker and the morals of a raccoon with a printing press. He launched his pill empire in the 1830s and became one of the richest men in Britain by selling two things. 1. Holloway's pills. 2. Holloway's ointment, a spicy foot cream basically. His ads claimed that his pills could cure headaches, liver disease, female complaints, male complaints, warts, whooping cough, paralysis, rabies, death, probably. He once advertised that they cured all disorders incident to humanity, which is either wildly optimistic or code for this pill does one thing and it's dramatic. What was in them? No one's entirely sure. The formula was secret, but modern analyses suggest the ingredients included aloe, a laxative, ginger, stimulating, and a laxative, myrrh, used in embalming, and a laxative, soap, yes, literal soap, and somehow also a laxative. Essentially, if it grew in the ground and made you poop, Thomas Holloway put it in a pill and charged you a shilling. The genius wasn't in the ingredients, it was in the presentation. The pills came in beautiful little tins. The advertising was everywhere. Newspapers, posters, pamphlets, even hot air balloons. Holloway sponsored lectures, opened a pill factory that looked like a palace, and even built a university, funded entirely by the collective bowel trauma of the British public. Testimonials poured in. People wrote letters swearing Holloway's pills cured their blindness, gave them jobs, reunited them with estranged cousins, and helped them survive horse-tram collisions. Whether any of it was true remains unclear, but Holloway printed the testimonials in bulk and mailed them to anyone with a pulse. Even Queen Victoria reportedly had some in the royal bathroom, because no one, not even monarchs, was immune to Victorian constipation marketing. Back in your Victorian washroom. You're lying flat on the floor, clutching your abdomen like a Shakespearean widow. You've sweat through your petticoats. You've spoken to your ancestors. You've seen God, and he looks disappointed. But hey, your skin is clear, your bile has been rebalanced, your humours are practically doing backflips, and you're 6 pounds lighter than you were at breakfast. At number 2, Holloway's pills earn their rank not just for being mildly effective at something, but for their sheer branding power. They didn't cure much, but they sold the fantasy better than anyone else in history. This was medicine by optimism, science by poster, and healing by hope, soap, and a toilet within sprinting distance. At number 1, towering above the ashes of Victorian medical mistakes, we find Godfrey's cordial, the ultimate remedy, the apex predator of Victorian panaceas, and the product that whispered, "Shh, it's fine. It's just morphine in molasses, for children." Yes, this syrup was a household staple for over a century, a miracle solution to teething, colic, crying, indigestion, and general childlike behaviour. Because when in doubt, the Victorians just drugged the baby. It wasn't just medicine, it was parenting, bottled. You pour a spoonful of Godfrey's cordial. It's thick, syrupy, sweet, smells faintly of fennel, treacle, and something your great-aunt calls quiet juice. You don't hesitate, because the baby's been screaming since Tuesday, and your sanity has left the building. You administer the dose. Within moments, the crying stops. The baby sighs, the baby smiles. The baby is now asleep, snoring gently, looking like a cherub in a watercolour. You feel like a genius, a hero, a Victorian super nanny. Then the baby stays asleep, for a while, a long while. What was in this magical miracle syrup? Laudanum, aka opium dissolved in alcohol. Tincture of aniseed, because why not add a little licorice? Treacle, to mask the taste of trauma, possibly the tears of exhausted governesses. It was a soothing syrup that didn't just quiet the child, it sedated them into a new personality, one that didn't cry, or move, or blink particularly often, and it wasn't just for babies. Oh no, Godfrey's cordial was also recommended for women's complaints, nervous gentlemen, the elderly, the hysterical, the hungover, the heartbreak-ridden, and anyone who simply needed to stop experiencing things. This stuff was everywhere. You could buy it from apothecaries, grocers, travelling merchants, and probably chimney sweeps. Mothers carried it in their handbags. Doctors recommended it with a wink. Midwives handed it out like candy. In some towns, it was considered a household essential, right next to tea, lard, and deep-seated denial. It was especially popular among working-class families who didn't have time for colicky infants while pulling 14-hour shifts in textile mills. Why hire help when you can just dose your toddler into a Victorian coma? Was it dangerous? Let me answer that with a quote from the British Medical Journal, 1890. A large proportion of infant deaths in industrial areas may be attributed to the habitual use of sedative compounds such as Godfrey's cordial. Translation: yes, very. It was killing babies, slowly, quietly, beautifully. But people didn't know that. Or they did, and they just really valued a good night's sleep. It took over 100 years before authorities finally removed Godfrey's cordial from the market. The 20th century rolled in, and someone in a health office finally asked, "Wait, should we be giving heroin syrup to teething babies?" By then it was too late. The cordial had already carved its name into medical history, in cursive, with a quill dipped in laudanum, back in your Victorian nursery. The house is silent, the fire is glowing, you're sipping tea and reading the gentlewoman's weekly digest of moral superiority. The baby hasn't stirred in hours. You've started to miss them, just a little. You peek into the cradle. They're still breathing. Probably. You blink. The room sways. You sit down and realise you accidentally tried a sip of the cordial earlier. The baby and you are now experiencing a mutual vacation from reality. At number 1, Godfrey's cordial wins the crown as the most dangerously effective, wildly popular and darkly iconic medicine of the Victorian age. The drug that conquered colic, silenced households, and proved once and for all that in the 1800s peace and quiet had a body count. And there you have it, the finest lineup of legally questionable, medically nonsensical, and beautifully packaged Victorian remedies ever peddled to a deeply unwell public. From radioactive water to arsenic wafers, from baby opium to pill-based exorcisms, the 1800s were less of a healthcare system and more of a pharmaceutical improv night, where everyone brought their own poison and hoped for the best. The labels promised miracles, the results delivered hallucinations, organ failure, and in many cases glowing corpses with excellent skin. So the next time you feel mildly under the weather, just be grateful you don't live in a time when a mysterious powder labelled liver rejuvenator could contain morphine, turpentine, and a suggestion of lead. Take your bland ibuprofen, sip your herbal tea, and thank modern science for at least pretending to test things before tossing them into syrup. The Victorians may have been constipated, irradiated, and mildly embalmed, but they did it with flair, optimism, and very little oversight. And now, as the final bottle is corked and the parlour glows with the warm haze of chloroform and misplaced confidence, I hope this absurd little tour through Victorian pharmacological madness lingers, like the aftertaste of a tonic that claimed to cure gout, hysteria, heartbreak, and accidentally turned you into a haunted chandelier. You've survived as arsenic beauty snacks, radioactive hydration, wine with a cocaine chaser, and enough powdered nonsense to stun a chimney sweep. But for now, it's time to rest. The opium's worn off, the organs have mostly recovered, and the quack doctor has finally packed up his wagon. If you're still awake, impressive. You've just made it through history's most fashionably medicated meltdown. Hit subscribe so we can uncork another dangerously mislabelled bottle of the past tomorrow night. And as you drift, the soft crackle of the fire will carry you deeper, far from glittering poisons and powdered optimism, and into sleep.